La Asamblea escuchará.
The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Michel Aoun, President of the Lebanese Republic. I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
En nombre de la Asamblea General.
On behalf of the General Assembly, it is my honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Michel Aoun, President of the Lebanese Republic, and invite him to address the Assembly.
معالي السيدة
Your Excellency, Ms. Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garcés, President of the 73rd Session of the UN General Assembly, Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Governments, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, Madam President, we would like to congratulate you on your election as the President of the 73rd Session of the United Nations, and we wish you luck in your work. And we would like to thank Mr. Miroslav Lajcak, the President of the 72nd Session, and we salute Mr. Guterres, and we commend his efforts, especially his reform project, as he head this international organization. Madam President, you have suggested a theme for this year, making the United Nations relevant for all the people, common responsibilities for peaceful, just, and sustainable societies. This is a commendable proposal. It means that the United Nations knows that its reality today requires a serious improvement so that it can carry out its future role. The United Nations, based on its purposes and the basis for which it was established, it must be the conscience of the world. It must maintain balance. It must achieve justice and maintain peace. However, we see that on many occasions, the Security Council was unable to adopt critical resolutions for certain countries due to the veto right. Some countries are not implementing the resolutions of the Security Council, even if these resolutions were binding and immediate, and this is happening with impunity. I will give you some examples from my region. Resolution 425 issued by the Security Council that called immediately on Israel to withdraw its troops from Lebanese territory. This was not implemented. It was only implemented after several decades following resistance from the Lebanese people. After that, we have the resolution that was adopted by the General Assembly that called for dividing Palestine. It was binding. It became binding, although it was not binding, and that resolution was implemented immediately. However, another resolution adopted by the GA in 1948 that called for the return of Palestinian refugees to their homeland as soon as possible. To this day, it remains unimplemented. The veto right, of course, has many reasons for its existence. However, the use of the veto right has had a negative impact on many peoples around the world, especially in my region, and has denied us many legitimate rights. Therefore, for the United Nations to have an international leadership that is relevant for all, it must be reformed in a way that takes into consideration the expansion of the Security Council and the increase of its membership. It must also work in a transparent and balanced way. On the other hand, it is important for the General Assembly to reflect the tendencies of the international community. The United Nations is also called for enhancing human rights around the world. Lebanon has contributed significantly to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We have committed to this declaration in the introduction and preamble of our Constitution. We believe that it is important to enhance the freedom of the individual, and any violation of human rights anywhere around the world could lead to conflicts in the future. In this regard, we would like to say that Lebanon is moving forward steadily in enhancing and promoting human rights at the legislative and executive levels. The Lebanese parliament has put forth a law on human rights that includes a committee that will look into allegations of torture and mistreatment. Furthermore, we are completing a national action plan on the implementation of Resolution 1325 adopted by the Security Council, and that called on member states to put in place action plans to enable women to participate in the decision-making process and the negotiation process, as well as in efforts to end conflicts. This Lebanese action plan guarantees the participation of women in the decision-making process at all levels and operationalize the role of women in preventing conflicts. Laws will also protect women from exploitation and violence and prevent any discrimination against women. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, in Lebanon, we are trying to mitigate the effects of conflicts around us. At the security level, we were able to promote our security after we were able to eradicate terrorist groups in the rural areas in our north, and we were able to eradicate sleeping cells. We also held parliamentary elections in accordance with a law that takes into consideration percentages, and therefore it was more reflective of all the components of the Lebanese society. And today we are working on forming a cabinet in accordance with the results of the elections. At the economic level, we have put in place headlines for economic growth that takes into consideration the outcomes of the Cedar Conference in order to operationalize the productive fields, modernize our infrastructure, and bridge the gap between income and expenditure in our budget. However, we are still facing the consequences of what is happening in Syria. We know that since the start of the war there's been an influx of individuals that took refuge in Lebanon. We are trying to provide a decent life to these individuals. However, their numbers are increasing, and they are also having an impact on Lebanese local communities. At the security level, with an increase in the level of crimes at more than 30%, at the economic level with a rise in unemployment to 21%, and at the demographic level, the population density has increased from 400 to 600 in 1 kilometer square, in addition to our limited resources and the scarcity of international support to Lebanon. This means that we will be unable to continue to carry this burden, especially given that the largest part of the Syrian territory is now safe. That is why I called for a safe return. Last year, when I spoke to you from this rostrum, I distinguished between a safe return and a voluntary return. Syrians who came to Lebanon are not political asylum seekers, except for a few of them. Most of them decided to come to Lebanon due to the security situation in their country or for economic reasons. They are the majority. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, I give you a map that was issued in 2014, issued by UNHCR. It shows the increase in the number of Syrian displaced persons registered from 25,000 in 2012 to more than 1 million in 2014 in the course of 2 years only, and they are spread out over the Lebanese territory. And this shows to you and explains what I am trying to tell you. In this regard, I would like to point out that the United Nations in 2014 stopped counting the numbers of displaced Syrians, and the Lebanese security forces continued with these statistics, and these statistics show an increase in these figures. And to this day, they are over 1.5 million displaced Syrians in Lebanon. Therefore, I would like to reaffirm the position of my country that seeks to enhance the right for a safe, sustainable return of displaced Syrians to their country without any delay in this very vital issue. It should not be linked to any political settlement that no one knows when it will be reached. And we refuse and reject any nationalization project for displaced or refugees. In this regard, we welcome any initiative that will seek to address the displacement problem, for instance, the Russian initiative. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, history has taught us that injustice leads to war, and when there is no justice, when there are double standards, then people feel a sense of an absence of justice, and this could lead to violence and terrorism. Unfortunately, international political approaches to the Middle East still lack justice, and there are double standards in this regard. The Palestinian question is an example of that. The absence of justice in this regard has led to wars in the Middle East, has led to a resistance that will only end when injustice ends. The world voted recently in the Security Council and in the General Assembly against the declaration of Jerusalem as a capital of Israel, and despite the results of both elections that reflected the will of the international community, some embassies were moved to Jerusalem. There was also a law on the Jewish nature of Israel. This unjust law that rejects others seeks to impede all peace efforts and the two-state solution. And then there was a decision to stop providing financial assistance to UNRWA. UNRWA is a UN agency for the relief and employment of Palestinian refugees. It provides support and protection to refugees until a solution has been reached that would end their suffering. Did their suffering end? Then why did the UNRWA role end? Or is this an attempt to try and make sure that they are no longer considered as refugees in an attempt to destroy the Palestinian identity and impose naturalization? Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, we have a people that overnight found itself without an identity and without a country due to a decision by those who were supposed to support and protect weak countries. Can you imagine for 1 second if a similar international decision has been taken without your approval that takes away from you your identity and your land? This people is trying as much as possible to hold on to their identity and their land. This is the situation of the Palestinian people spread out all over the world. Will we accept a similar situation for ourselves and for our people? How can the international conscience agree to that? International charters and instruments, is that their content? Is that what they ratify? Small nations such as Lebanon, what if we face the same fate? Furthermore, Israeli violations of different resolutions continue. Although Lebanon has been fully committed to this resolution, the Israeli violations are monthly. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, our world today is suffering from extremism and radicalization. There's a refusal of others, a refusal of their existence, their civilization, and this crisis will exacerbate. And no country around the world is safe from extremism and from this phenomenon and its destructive effects. For this crisis will implode from within. The United Nations, and before that the League of Nations, were unable to prevent wars and maintain peace and achieve justice, especially in our region. One of the main reasons is because there is no international culture of peace that is based on understanding and knowing others and peacefully coexisting with others. Therefore, there is an urgent need for a dialogue between religions, civilizations, and races. We need international cultural institutes that are specialized in spreading the culture of peace and dialogue. Lebanon, as a pluralistic society where Christians and Muslims live side by side and share power and resources. We also have the Lebanese diaspora spread out all over the world. We have common grounds with many civilizations. Therefore, we would be the perfect place to establish an institute that would seek to promote dialogue and peace. From this rostrum last year, I launched an initiative to turn Lebanon into a regional hub for a dialogue between civilizations and cultures. We hope that this initiative will turn into a multilateral agreement to establish such an institute and such a center that will be an international project for continuous dialogue and for enhancing coexistence in line with the purposes and principles of the United Nations and the principles of preventive diplomacy to prevent conflicts. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, human beings are against ignorance. Our salvation is in dialogue, is in coming together, in rejecting violence, and in achieving justice. Dialogue alone will ensure stability and security, will achieve sustainable development. I thank you for your attention.
En nombre de la Asamblea General.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank His Excellency Mr. Michel Aoun, President of the Lebanese Republic, for this statement. I request protocol. I request the representatives to remain seated while we greet the head of state.